Today we are going to be diving into 5 things Netflix got wrong about Jeffrey Dahmer and Dahmer Monster. The Jeffrey Dahmer Story. Issue 1: The Truth About Glenda Cleveland. Former crime reporter Annie Schwartz told The Independent she believes the filmmakers behind Monster took artistic license with aspects of the case to create a more entertaining narrative. Schwartz, who broke the story in 1991 for the Milwaukee Journal, said the project does not bear a great deal of resemblance to the facts of the case. Schwartz is also the author of a 1991 best-selling book about the case called The Man Who Could Not Kill Enough. One part of the series that stuck out to Schwartz was the depiction of Glenda Cleveland, who is played on the show by Niecy Nash. Cleveland is portrayed as Dahmer's neighbor in the Oxford Apartments building. The series chronicles her repeated attempts to alert authorities about the smells and noises filtering through her vents from Dahmer's apartment. In reality, she didn't live in the same building as Dahmer but in an adjacent one across the street. In the first 5 minutes of the first episode, you have Glenda Cleveland knocking on his door. None of that ever happened, Schwartz told The Independent. In real life, Cleveland did call the police after her niece and daughter came across 14-year-old victim Conor Hassam's phone after he escaped from Dahmer's apartment. After Dahmer convinced the cops to return Hassam's phone, Cleveland made multiple phone calls to law enforcement, including one to the FBI. However, her interactions with Dahmer, including the scene with a questionable sandwich, were partially embellished. The filmmakers combined Cleveland's role with Dahmer's actual neighbor, Pamela Bass, who told the story of Dahmer offering her a sandwich she feared had human meat. The Milwaukee Journal Sentinel reports. Issue 2: Representation of police as racist and homophobic. Schwartz also took issue with the picture Monster painted of a police force tainted by racism and homophobia. Dahmer's victims were primarily black and brown gay men. And the series hints that the ineffectiveness of police, in this case, was due to their biases against the community Dahmer seemed to target. She told The Independent, "I've spent a lot of time with them, interviewing the people who were at the scene. Again, this is a dramatization, but at a time when it is not exactly easy for law enforcement to get trust and buy-in from the community. It's not a very helpful representation." Yet the scenes that depict the police comment about being deloused after being in a gay man's apartment did happen, according to Decider. The threatening phone calls that police officers made to the Hassan phone family were confirmed by Police Chief Philip Ariala, according to Milwaukee Journal Sentinel. Issue 3: Dahmer worked at the Milwaukee Blood Plasma Center, but he didn't drink blood bags. Dahmer's cannibalistic nature has been covered in many films, books, and television shows based on his story. The Netflix series documented his obsession with human anatomy and his experimental journey that culminated in full-blown cannibalism. However, one instance of Dahmer's taste for human flesh was slightly embellished for the series. In one episode, Dahmer starts a job at the Milwaukee Blood Plasma Center and is shown stealing bags of donated blood to take home and drink. In reality, Dahmer confessed to taking a small vial onto the facility's roof and tasting it before spitting it out on the rooftop. Issue 4: What really happened with living victim Ron Flowers. Some of Dahmer's victims managed to escape becoming his murder victims. One of those men, Ronald Flowers, is depicted in the series as being saved because Dahmer's grandmother decided to stay with him until he was all right. The circumstances of Flowers ending up in her house are consistent with real life. Flowers accompanied Dahmer to his grandmother's house under the belief that he was helping Dahmer to jump his car battery. Dahmer offered him alcohol, causing Flowers to get suspicious and upset. Dahmer offered him coffee instead, drugging Flowers in the process. In the series, Dahmer is unable to do anything to Flowers because his grandmother is concerned about finding the drugged young man in her living room. She refuses to let Flowers out of sight and stays with him through the night. She is then shown helping Dahmer put him on a bus, with Flowers clearly still under the influence of the drugs. Flowers wakes up in the local hospital drugged but unscathed. He reports Dahmer to the police, but they find the killer credible especially given that his grandmother corroborates his story. In real life, though, there is no evidence that Dahmer let Flowers live because of his grandmother's intervention. In another book by Schwartz called Monster, The True Story of the Jeffrey Dahmer Murders, Dahmer recalls that he decided against killing Flowers because his would-be victim weighed 250 pounds and his body would have been challenging to move. Flowers recounted his experience with Dahmer in the documentary Jeffrey Dahmer, Mind of a Monster, where he said there was evidence that Dahmer had sexually assaulted him, something the series left out. Issue 5. Jeffrey's real neighbors were not overly suspicious of him. As previously mentioned, Pamela Bass was a neighbor who lived within the same building and had interactions with Dahmer. In a documentary, The Dahmer Files, she described him as kind of friendly but kind of introverted, and recalled a time where she saw him taking a bag of trash out, which in retrospect now makes her feel uneasy. She also revealed that she would occasionally have a beer at Dahmer's house and still didn't suspect anything, describing him as someone who would always share. The most Bass claims to have heard from Dahmer's apartment was music. In my opinion, he appeared to be a geek, said another neighbor in a news interview at the time. By that I mean he kept to himself and would just do weird things, but not to the degree that you would think. According to some reports, Dahmer's neighbors didn't complain that his apartment smelled of flesh. They only believed it to smell of urine, which, while unhygienic, didn't feel like cause for concern. If there was something we missed, let us know in the comments. If you are interested in making videos like this, check the links in the description.